Well, Bev, what they're trying to do is stop the asylum seekers arriving by boat who are using the English Channel, and they're getting in these small inflatable dinghies and making that journey, that perilous journey. And what they want to do is bringing legislation that would allow them to deport anybody who arrives by these small boats, and then make sure that they can never return to the UK or even apply for British citizenship. And what you've got going on here, Bev, is really a political problem and a humanitarian problem. A political problem because you've got Rishi Sunak leading a government of Brexiteers who said when they got Brexit done that they would bring back control of their borders. And in the last year, 45,000 people have made the journey by boat and landed in the UK. Rishi Sunak has said this is one of his top 5 promises that he wants to see resolved, and you get the sense that they believe that this is an area where they can put pressure on Labor, who is significantly ahead in the polls, to make them seem weak on issues of border protection. It's also a humanitarian problem because you've got people putting themselves into the hands of unscrupulous people smugglers who are sending them on these perilous journeys. And we saw, of course, back in November 21, I think it was, around 27 people drowned when one of these boats capsized. So you've got a real humanitarian problem there. Now, critics of this new proposed legislation say, yes, it is a humanitarian problem, but if the government was serious about that, they would be trying to open up more legitimate avenues to apply for asylum in other countries, like, for example, Afghanistan. The government saying that they will try and start doing that, but once they stop the boats arriving in the UK.
Yeah, so will this plan work, though?
We really don't know, Bev. There's a lot of question marks. Number one, there's a question mark over whether it will be challenged before the courts. There's legal opinions flying around at the moment that it's in breach of human rights law, international law, the Refugee Convention. The Prime Minister, Rishi Sunak, says he's up for the challenge. If anyone wants to challenge these laws, that he will fight that. The big question mark too is over deportations. So the UK does not have a plan at the moment because they've had that proposed, Rwanda solution, but that's being challenged before the courts. So they don't have another country that they can actually deport people to at the moment, unlike when Australia had Nauru and Manus Islands set up. They don't have that kind of similar operation happening at the moment. There's also a question mark over if you can't deport under the Refugee Convention somebody back to a country that they have fled where they've been persecuted. That's under the policy of non-refoulement. And so that's part of the 1951 Refugee Convention. So they're going to have problems with that. And also I think a broader issue too is that they obviously are trying to replicate parts of the Australian policy here, but a key part of the Australian policy was boat turnbacks, and that's not on the table as far as we can see at the moment.
Yeah, and as you point out, there's been referencing to the Australia's Operation Sovereign Borders that's considered to be the framework for this, but given the proximity to its European neighbours, it's a whole different ballgame for the UK.
It really is, and its narrowest point, I think it's about 33 kilometres from France to the UK in the English Channel. So it makes access far more easy than, say, trying to get a boat from Indonesia to Australia. And when that trade was happening, they were using Indonesian fishing trawlers. Here they're using rubber dinghies to do this quite short journey, so it's quite different. Also, the people flow of asylum seekers from Europe is very different to what it was in Indonesia about a decade ago when Australia reinstituted this policy. They don't have boat turnbacks on the table. So you see the rhetoric's very similar. In fact, Rishi Sunak got in front of a podium yesterday that said stop the boats. So the rhetoric is very similar, but the circumstances are different. Also, another key difference, I think, is that Britain is under the jurisdiction of the European Convention of Human Rights. And that means that this legislation could be open to challenge via that avenue as well, which is something that Australia didn't have to deal with when it implemented its offshore processing policies.